Captain Maya Richardson adjusted her aviator sunglasses as she stepped out of the taxi at the private airfield in Monaco. The Mediterranean sun gleamed off the pristine white fuselage of the G650 that awaited her. At 28, she had already logged over 4,000 flight hours and earned her captain's stripes with one of the most prestigious charter companies in Europe. Her reputation for handling difficult clients and challenging flights had made her the go-to pilot for high-profile passengers who demanded both discretion and excellence. Maya's dark skin glistened with a light sheen of perspiration as she conducted her pre-flight inspection. She had grown accustomed to the stares and whispers that followed her in an industry still dominated by white men. Her grandfather had been a Tuskegee airman, and her father had flown commercial jets for 30 years before retiring. Aviation was in her blood, and she had never let anyone's doubts about her abilities slow her down. The charter company had been unusually secretive about today's passenger, providing only a departure time and destination. All Maya knew was that she would be flying someone from Monaco to Geneva, a relatively short hop that should take less than 2 hours. She had arrived early, as always, to ensure everything was perfect. Blackwood emerged from the black that had just pulled up to the aircraft. At 35, he commanded attention wherever he went. Standing 6 feet 2 inches tall with striking blue eyes and perfectly styled dark hair, he possessed the kind of confidence that came from building a business empire worth over $3 billion. His tech company had revolutionized cloud computing, and his investments in renewable energy had made him one of the youngest billionaires in Europe. Had a reputation for being demanding, eccentric, and occasionally cruel in his business dealings. He enjoyed testing people, pushing them to their limits to see what they were truly made of. His personal life was equally scrutinized by the media, with tabloids constantly speculating about his relationships and unconventional behavior. As approached the aircraft, Maya stepped forward to greet him professionally. She extended her hand with a warm smile. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood. I'm Captain Richardson, and I'll be your pilot today. Everything is ready for our departure to Geneva." Paused, looking Maya up and down with an expression that was difficult to read. He had specifically requested the company's best pilot, expecting to find the usual middle-aged white man he was accustomed to flying with. The sight of a young black woman in captain's stripes was unexpected, and he couldn't resist making his surprise known. "You're the pilot?" asked, his tone carrying a hint of skepticism that immediately put Maya on edge. "How old are you?" Maya's smile remained professional, though she felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with having her qualifications questioned. "I'm 28, sir, and I've been flying for over 10 years. I have all the necessary certifications and ratings for this aircraft." Circled around Maya slowly, as if inspecting a piece of equipment rather than greeting a fellow professional. 10 years? That's interesting. Most people your age are still figuring out what they want to do with their lives. The condescending tone was unmistakable now, and Maya felt her jaw clench slightly. She had dealt with difficult passengers before, but something about demeanor suggested this flight might be more challenging than usual. "I've been passionate about aviation since I was a child, Mr. Blackwood. Flying is what I was born to do." Stopped in front of her, a slow smile spreading across his face. It wasn't a particularly warm smile, and it didn't reach his eyes. "Born to do it, you say? Well, that's quite a claim. Tell me, Captain Richardson, have you ever flown in truly challenging conditions? I'm not talking about a little turbulence or some rain. I'm talking about situations that separate real pilots from people who just happen to hold licenses." Maya's professional composure was being tested, but she maintained her calm exterior. "I've flown in severe weather conditions, including thunderstorms, ice, and crosswinds well above normal limits. I've also handled emergency situations including engine failures and hydraulic problems. My safety record is spotless." "Impressive credentials," said, though his tone suggested he wasn't particularly impressed at all. "But credentials on paper and real-world performance are two very different things. Anyone can memorize procedures and pass tests." The billionaire walked over to the aircraft and ran his hand along its sleek surface. "This is a beautiful machine, isn't it? $65 million worth of engineering perfection. It can fly at Mach 0.925, reach altitudes of 51,000 feet, and travel over 7,000 nautical miles without refueling. In the right hands, it's capable of incredible things." Maya followed him, her patience wearing thin but her professionalism intact. "Yes, sir. It's an exceptional aircraft, and I'm fully qualified to operate it safely and efficiently. Turned back to her suddenly, his eyes gleaming with what could only be described as mischief. Safely and efficiently, how wonderfully predictable. But what about skillfully? What about pushing the envelope? What about showing me what this machine can really do? Mr. Blackwood, I'm required to operate within federal aviation regulations and company safety protocols, Maya replied firmly. My responsibility is to get you to your destination safely. Of course, waved his hand dismissively. But here's the thing, Captain Richardson. I didn't become successful by playing it safe. I didn't build my fortune by following other people's rules and staying within comfortable boundaries. I'm curious to see if you have that same killer instinct. Maya felt a chill run down her spine despite the warm Monaco sunshine. Something about this conversation was heading in a direction she didn't like, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what was driving at. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking, sir. Walked closer to Maya, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but his words carried clearly in the still air of the private airfield. I'm asking if you're willing to prove yourself. I'm asking if you have the courage to show me that you're not just another pilot hiding behind regulations and procedures. I'm asking if you're ready to earn something extraordinary. Earn what exactly? Maya asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. Smile widened, and this time it carried a predatory quality that made Maya's skin crawl. My hand in marriage. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge thrown down in an old Western movie. Maya blinked several times, certain she had misheard or misunderstood. I'm sorry, what did you say? You heard me correctly, Captain Richardson. I'm proposing a wager, a test, if you will. Fly this plane the way I want you to fly it, demonstrate the kind of skill and courage I'm looking for, and I'll marry you. Maya's mouth opened and closed several times as she struggled to process what she was hearing. Mr. Blackwood, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I'm here to provide a transportation service, not to participate in whatever game you think you're playing. Oh, but it's not a game at all, replied, his voice taking on a harder edge. I'm completely serious. You see, I've been thinking lately about settling down, finding a wife who can match my ambition and drive. Someone who isn't just interested in my money, but who can prove they deserve to be part of my world. The audacity of the proposal left Maya speechless for several seconds. When she finally found her voice, it carried a mixture of anger and disbelief. Are you suggesting that I should risk my career, my license, and potentially our lives just to impress you enough to marry me? A man I met 5 minutes ago. Risk is relative, Captain Richardson. What's risky is spending your entire life playing it safe, following rules that other people made, and never discovering what you're truly capable of. What's risky is letting opportunities pass you by because you're too afraid to seize them. Began packing back and forth in front of the aircraft, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the tarmac. Do you know what I see when I look at successful people? I see individuals who weren't afraid to take calculated risks, who weren't afraid to bet on themselves when the stakes were high. This isn't a calculated risk, Maya shot back, her professional composure finally cracking. This is reckless endangerment, and frankly, it's insulting. You don't even know me, and you're treating marriage like it's some kind of prize to be won in a stunt flying competition. Isn't it, though? Countered. Think about it, Captain Richardson. Marriage is the ultimate partnership. It requires trust, communication, shared goals, and the ability to handle pressure together. What better way to test those qualities than in a high-stakes situation? Maya shook her head in amazement. You're serious about this, aren't you? You actually think this is a reasonable way to choose a life partner? I think conventional approaches to finding a spouse are ineffective and wasteful, replied matter-of-factly. I've been on countless dates with women who were either or socialites with no real substance. I've been married once before to someone who seemed perfect on paper but couldn't handle the realities of my lifestyle. This time, I want to find someone extraordinary. And you think someone extraordinary would be willing to jump through hoops for your amusement? Stopped packing and looked directly at Maya. I think someone extraordinary would recognize an extraordinary opportunity when they see it. Do you have any idea what marriage to me would mean for your life? The doors it would open, the experiences you could have. I can't believe I'm even having this conversation, Maya muttered, running her hands through her hair. Mr. Blackwood, I'm going to suggest that we proceed with a normal flight to Geneva. Once we land, you can find another pilot for your return trip and hopefully seek some professional counseling. So you're declining my offer? Asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't particularly surprised. I'm declining your insane proposal, yes. I'm a professional pilot, not a contestant in some twisted reality show. Nodded slowly, as if he had expected this response. That's disappointing, but not entirely unexpected. Most people lack the vision to see beyond their limited circumstances. Most people are content with mediocrity. The casual dismissal in his voice sparked something in Maya that she hadn't expected. Growing up as one of the few black students in her flight training programs, she had endured countless doubts about her abilities. She had worked twice as hard as her male counterparts to earn the same recognition. She had smiled politely while instructors questioned whether she was really cut out for this, and while fellow students suggested she was only there because of affirmative action. Limited circumstances, Maya repeated, her voice rising slightly. Mediocrity, Mr. Blackwood, I've earned everything I have. I've worked for every rating, every certification, every promotion. I didn't inherit my position or buy my way into this industry. No, you certainly didn't, agreed. And that's exactly why I'm interested. You've already proven you're not ordinary. The question is whether you're willing to prove you're extraordinary. Despite herself, Maya found her curiosity piqued. What exactly would this test involve? And I want specifics, not vague suggestions about pushing envelopes. His eyes lit up at the question, sensing that he might have found a crack in her defenses. Nothing that would violate major safety protocols, nothing that would put us in real danger, but nothing ordinary either. I want to see precision flying. I want to see you handle this aircraft like it's an extension of yourself. Give me an example. Low-level flying, threading the needle between mountain peaks, demonstrating that you can make this machine dance in the sky instead of just trudging through it like a flying bus. Maya felt her pulse quicken despite her better judgment. The truth was, she loved aggressive flying. She had spent countless hours in aerobatic aircraft, pushing herself and her machines to their limits. Commercial flying paid the bills, but it rarely challenged her skills the way she craved. That's still incredibly vague, she said, though her voice had lost some of its earlier anger. Because the specifics will depend on conditions and opportunity, replied. What I'm looking for is someone who can think on their feet, adapt to changing circumstances, and execute precision maneuvers under pressure. Someone who can turn a routine flight into something memorable. Maya walked over to the aircraft and placed her hand on its fuselage, feeling the cool metal beneath her palm. She thought about her career trajectory, her carefully planned path toward eventually captaining commercial airliners for major carriers. She thought about her savings account, her modest apartment, her sensible life choices. Then she thought about the gleam in his eyes when he talked about taking risks and seizing opportunities. She thought about the casual confidence with which he had made his outrageous proposal, as if offering marriage to a stranger was perfectly reasonable. She thought about what it might be like to have access to unlimited resources, to be able to fly anywhere in the world whenever she wanted. Hypothetically speaking, Maya said slowly, if I were to agree to this ridiculous wager, what would happen if I didn't meet your standards? What if you decided my flying wasn't impressive enough to warrant a marriage proposal from the great Blackwood? Consider the question carefully. Then you would have had an interesting flight, a good story to tell, and the satisfaction of knowing you took a chance on something extraordinary. Plus, I'd pay you 10 times your normal fee for the flight. And if I did meet your standards, then you'd find yourself engaged to one of the wealthiest men in Europe, with access to a lifestyle most people can only dream about. Maya was quiet for a long moment, staring at the aircraft and trying to process the surreal situation she found herself in. Every rational part of her mind was screaming that this was insane, that she should walk away immediately and report to the charter company for inappropriate behavior. But another part of her, a part she usually kept carefully controlled, was intrigued by the challenge. She had always been competitive, always driven to prove herself against any doubts or limitations others tried to place on her. And if she was being completely honest with herself, the idea of showing off her flying skills to someone who would actually appreciate precision and artistry was appealing. Mr. Blackwood, she said finally, turning back to face him, I need to be absolutely clear about something. I'm not agreeing to anything yet. But if I were to consider this, it would be because I want to prove what I'm capable of, not because I'm interested in marrying you. Understood completely. The marriage proposal is simply my way of raising the stakes high enough to make the exercise worthwhile. And you're certain that what you're asking for won't compromise safety. I'm certain that it won't compromise safety any more than aerobatic flying or air show performances compromise safety. There's always risk in aviation, Captain Richardson. The question is whether you're skilled enough to manage that risk while delivering something spectacular. Maya felt her heart racing as she considered the possibilities. She thought about all the times she had played it safe, followed procedures exactly, and delivered unremarkable but reliable service. She thought about her dreams of flying aerobatic competitions, dreams she had set aside in favor of a stable career path. If I agree to this, she said slowly, I want to be clear that I'm doing it on my terms. I decide what maneuvers are safe and appropriate. I decide what risks are acceptable, and if at any point I determine that you're asking for something dangerous, the test is over. Nodded eagerly. Absolutely. I want to see skilled flying, not reckless stupidity. I have no interest in dying today. Maya took a deep breath and looked up at the clear blue sky above Monaco. Somewhere up there, beyond the reach of normal commercial traffic, lay the opportunity to fly the way she had always dreamed of flying, to push herself and her aircraft to perform at levels that would demonstrate her true capabilities. Against my better judgment, she heard herself saying, I accept your challenge, Mr. Blackwood, but I want you to know that I think you're absolutely insane. His grin was triumphant. Captain Richardson, I wouldn't have it any other way. Maya's hands moved with practiced efficiency through the pre-flight checklist, but her mind was racing with what she had just agreed to. As she conducted the final systems checks, she kept stealing glances at who had settled into one of the luxurious leather seats and was watching her every movement with intense interest. The G650's engines spooled up with a satisfying whine, and Maya felt some of her nervousness transform into the familiar excitement that always accompanied the start of a flight. She had logged hundreds of hours in similar aircraft, but today felt different. Today, she wasn't just a chauffeur in the sky. She was about to demonstrate why she had fallen in love with flying in the first place. Monaco Tower, this is Gulfstream November 77 Delta requesting taxi clearance for departure. Maya spoke into her headset with a calm professionalism that had become second nature. 77 Delta, taxi to runway 04 right, wind 030 at 12 knots, altimeter 2997. As they taxied toward the runway, Maya found herself analyzing the weather conditions and terrain around Monaco with fresh eyes. The Mediterranean coastline offered some interesting possibilities for low-level flying, and the mountains rising behind the principality could provide the kind of challenging terrain that would truly test her skills. Have you given any thought to what you'd like to see first? Maya asked over the intercom, surprised at how steady her voice sounded despite the butterflies in her stomach. Leaned forward in his seat, his eyes bright with anticipation. I want to see how well you handle precision flying at low altitude. Show me that you can make this aircraft perform like a fighter jet instead of a corporate transport. Maya felt a familiar thrill at the challenge. During her time in college, she had spent countless hours in aerobatic aircraft, learning to push both herself and her machines to their limits. Those skills had made her a better commercial pilot, but she rarely had the opportunity to demonstrate them in her day-to-day work. Monaco Tower, 77 Delta ready for departure. 77 Delta, cleared for takeoff runway 04 right, contact departure on 124.9. Maya advanced the throttles and felt the powerful Rolls-Royce engines push them down the runway. The acceleration was smooth and controlled, but she could sense the incredible power waiting to be unleashed. As they lifted off over the Mediterranean, Maya banked the aircraft more aggressively than she would during a normal commercial flight, demonstrating her comfort with the aircraft's capabilities. Nice takeoff, commented, though his tone suggested he was reserving judgment until he saw more impressive maneuvers. Maya climbed to cruising altitude while requesting a route modification from air traffic control. Her plan was to take them on a scenic route over the French Alps, where the dramatic terrain would provide the perfect backdrop for the kind of flying wanted to see. Control, 77 Delta requesting route modification for sightseeing tour of the Alps, maintaining VFR conditions below 10,000 feet. The controller's response was initially hesitant. But when Maya provided her credentials and explained that they were conducting a demonstration flight for a potential aircraft buyer, permission was granted with the usual warnings about terrain clearance and weather conditions. As they approached the foothills of the Alps, Maya began her descent to 8,000 feet. The rugged peaks stretched out before them like jagged teeth against the brilliant blue sky, and Maya felt her pulse quicken with anticipation. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm going to demonstrate some precision flying through the mountain passes. I want you to understand that what I'm about to do requires extensive training and experience. Please ensure you're as secure." Tightened his and gripped his armrests. "I'm ready, Captain Richardson. Show me what you've got." Maya reduced power and began threading the aircraft between two massive peaks, using techniques she had learned during her aerobatic training. They responded beautifully to her inputs, banking smoothly left and right as she navigated the narrow valley with precision that left little margin for error. The mountains seemed to rush past the windows as Maya maintained an altitude that kept them well within safety limits, while still providing the thrilling sensation of intimate contact with the terrain. She could hear sharp intake of breath as she rolled the aircraft into a steep turn around a particularly dramatic peak, the G-forces pressing them both back into their seats. "This is incredible," breathed, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine admiration. "I had no idea a corporate jet could be flown like this." Maya smiled grimly, her concentration focused entirely on the terrain ahead. Most pilots treat these aircraft like flying buses, but they're capable of so much more when handled properly. The key is understanding the aircraft's limits and staying well within them while still pushing the boundaries of conventional flying. She rolled the aircraft into another steep turn, this time using the thermal currents rising from the sun-heated rocks below to assist in their climb over a high ridge. The maneuver required split-second timing and a deep understanding of mountain flying techniques, and Maya executed it flawlessly. As they crested the ridge, the dramatic vista of the massif spread out before them. Maya descended into another valley, this one even narrower than the first, requiring her to fly with surgical precision to maintain safe separation from the rocky walls on either side. "How close are we to those rocks?" asked, his voice tight with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. "Closer than you'd ever experience on a commercial flight, but well within safe parameters," Maya replied. "The key is understanding visual perspective at this speed. What looks impossibly close is actually quite safe when you know how to read the terrain properly." Maya rolled the aircraft into a climbing spiral that took them up the face of a massive mountain wall, using the rising air currents to achieve a dramatic rate of climb while maintaining visual contact with the terrain at all times. The maneuver was both beautiful and technically demanding, requiring her to manage power, airspeed, and banking angle with precision that left no room for error. At the top of the spiral, Maya leveled off and flew directly over a glacier-covered peak, the ice and snow rushing past just hundreds of feet below. The contrast between the pristine white of the glacier and the deep blue of the sky created a breathtaking backdrop for their flight. "My God," whispered, pressing his face to the window. "I've never seen anything like this. It's like you're conducting an orchestra, but instead of music, you're creating poetry in motion." Maya felt a surge of pride at his words. This was what she lived for, those moments when flying transcended mere transportation and became an art form. She had spent years developing these skills, and it was gratifying to have someone recognize and appreciate the level of expertise required. "Would you like to see some more aggressive maneuvering?" Maya asked, her confidence building with each successful maneuver. "Absolutely. I want to see everything you're capable of." Maya climbed to a higher altitude and then put the aircraft into a controlled dive toward a mountain lake far below. As they descended, she rolled the aircraft into a series of gentle barrel rolls, demonstrating her ability to maintain complete control even while performing maneuvers that would terrify most passengers. The lake grew larger in their windscreen as Maya maintained the dive until what seemed like the last possible moment before pulling up into a dramatic climbing turn that took them soaring over another ridge line. The G-forces pressed them deep into their seats as Maya demonstrated the aircraft's impressive performance capabilities. "That was either very skillful or very crazy," said, though his tone suggested he was leaning toward the former. "The difference between skillful and crazy is preparation, training, and respect for the aircraft's capabilities," Maya replied. I never attempt anything I haven't practiced extensively in safer conditions. As they continued their flight through the Alps, Maya demonstrated a variety of advanced flying techniques. She showed how to use terrain features to assist in navigation, how to read wind patterns from visual cues on the ground, and how to maintain precise altitude control while flying through rapidly changing atmospheric conditions. One of the most impressive maneuvers came as they approached a particularly narrow canyon. Maya descended to follow the canyon floor, flying between walls of rock that seemed impossibly close on both sides. The canyon twisted and turned like a river, requiring her to maintain constant adjustments to her flight path while managing airspeed and altitude with surgical precision. "This is like flying through a tunnel," observed, his voice filled with awe. "It requires you to think several moves ahead, like chess," Maya explained. "You have to anticipate every turn, every altitude change, every potential obstacle before you encounter it. There's no time for hesitation or second-guessing at this speed and altitude." As they emerged from the canyon into a wide valley, Maya pulled the aircraft into a steep climb that showcased its impressive power-to-weight ratio. They soared upward like a rocket, gaining altitude so rapidly that felt his ears pop from the pressure change. At the top of the climb, Maya leveled off and flew directly toward what appeared to be a solid wall of rock. At the last moment, she banked sharply to reveal a hidden pass between two peaks, threading the aircraft through the narrow opening with room to spare on either side. "How did you know that pass was there?" asked, his admiration for Maya's skills growing with each maneuver. "Experience and careful observation," Maya replied. "You learn to read terrain features, to understand how mountains are formed and where natural passes are likely to occur. Plus, I studied the topographical charts extensively before we began this demonstration." The flight continued with Maya demonstrating one impressive maneuver after another. She showed how to use differential power settings to achieve precise control during slow-speed flight, how to execute perfect knife-edge passes around mountain peaks, and how to maintain formation flying positions relative to terrain features. One particularly dramatic moment came when Maya flew the aircraft directly toward the face of, descending until they were skimming just above the before pulling up into a vertical climb that took them soaring over the summit. The maneuver required perfect timing and absolute confidence in the aircraft's performance capabilities. "I feel like I'm watching a master class in aviation," said as they cleared the peak. "You make it look effortless, but I can see the incredible skill and concentration required." Maya felt a warmth spreading through her chest at his words. For too long, she had been underestimated and undervalued because of her age, gender, and race. To have someone recognize and appreciate her true capabilities was more satisfying than she had expected. As they approached the eastern edge of the Alps, Maya began to consider how to conclude their demonstration. She wanted to end with something memorable, something that would showcase not just her technical skills but her artistic sensibility as a pilot. She found her opportunity as they approached Lake Geneva, the body of water stretching out below them like a mirror reflecting the surrounding mountains. Maya descended to just a few hundred feet above the lake's surface and began flying a series of graceful arcs and turns that traced elegant patterns across the water. From perspective, it looked as though Maya was using the lake as a canvas, painting invisible masterpieces in the sky with the aircraft's wake. She varied their altitude and banking angle to create a complex three-dimensional dance that was both beautiful and technically impressive. "This is incredible," breathed. "It's like watching a ballet performed at 300 miles per hour." Maya smiled, feeling more confident and alive than she had in months. This was what flying was supposed to feel like, she realized. Not the routine transportation of passengers from point A to point B, but the expression of human creativity and skill through the mastery of a complex machine. As they completed their final pass over Lake Geneva, Maya began their approach to Geneva's airport. Even this routine procedure became an opportunity to demonstrate her skills, as she executed a precision approach that would have impressed even the most demanding flight instructor. "Geneva Tower, 77 Delta requesting landing clearance, runway 28 left." 77 Delta, cleared to land runway 28 left, winds 270 at 8 knots. Maya brought the aircraft down in a landing so smooth that barely felt the wheels touch the runway. As they taxied toward the private aviation terminal, She reflected on what had been one of the most satisfying flights of her career. "Captain Richardson," said as Maya shut down the engines, "I have to admit something to you." Maya turned in her seat to face him, unsure what to expect. "I've flown with dozens of pilots over the years, and I've never experienced anything remotely close to what you just demonstrated. That wasn't just flying, that was artistry." Maya felt a flush of pride at his words, but she also felt a growing apprehension about what would come next. She had proven her capabilities beyond any doubt, which meant that would now expect her to fulfill her part of their bizarre agreement. "So what happens now?" she asked, though she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to hear the answer. Unbuckled his and stood up, looking out the window at the Geneva airport. Maya stared at in stunned silence as the reality of the situation hit her. The adrenaline from their incredible flight was still coursing through her veins, but now it was mixed with a cocktail of disbelief, anxiety, and something she couldn't quite identify. Had she really just agreed to marry a man she barely knew based on a flying demonstration? "Mr. Blackwood," she began carefully, "I think we need to step back and discuss this rationally. What just happened up there was incredible, and I'm proud of what I was able to demonstrate, but marriage is a serious commitment that can't be based on a single flight." Moved closer to her, his blue eyes intense and focused. "Captain Richardson, Maya, what happened up there proved everything I suspected about you. You're not just technically skilled, you're an artist. You have vision, courage, and the ability to perform under pressure. Those are exactly the qualities I'm looking for in a partner." Maya shook her head, trying to process the surreal conversation. "But you don't know anything about me beyond my flying abilities. You don't know my values, my goals, my personality, my family background. How can you possibly think we're compatible for marriage?" "Because everything I need to know about your character was revealed in how you handled that aircraft," replied confidently. "The precision, the creativity, the way you pushed boundaries while maintaining absolute control. Those qualities translate to every aspect of life." Maya stood up and began packing the small cabin space. "That's not how relationships work. Flying skills don't predict compatibility in marriage. What about shared interests? What about emotional connection? What about love?" Watched her pace, his expression thoughtful. "Love is overrated, Maya. It's a temporary chemical reaction that clouds judgment and leads to poor decisions. What matters in a successful partnership is mutual respect, shared ambition, and compatible goals." "That's the most cynical thing I've ever heard," Maya responded, turning to face him directly. "Love is what makes marriage meaningful. Without it, you're just describing a business partnership." "And what's wrong with a business partnership?" asked. "My previous marriage failed precisely because it was based on romantic love rather than practical compatibility. My ex-wife loved the idea of being married to a billionaire, but she couldn't handle the realities of my lifestyle." Maya sat back down, studying his face carefully. Behind his confident exterior, she was beginning to see hints of vulnerability and past pain that explained his unconventional approach to relationships. "Tell me about your first marriage," she said gently. Was quiet for several moments, looking out the window at the Geneva airport. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weariness that hadn't been there before. "Her name was Victoria. We met at a charity gala in London 3 years ago. She was beautiful, sophisticated, came from a wealthy family. Everything looked perfect on paper. We had a whirlwind romance, got engaged after 6 months, married in a ceremony that cost more than most people make in a lifetime." "What went wrong?" "Victoria wanted the status and lifestyle of being married to a successful businessman, but she didn't want the businessman himself. She resented my work schedule, hated my travel requirements, and couldn't understand why building companies and managing investments required so much of my time and energy." Maya could hear the hurt in his voice despite his attempt to remain matter-of-fact. "That sounds incredibly painful. The breaking point came when I missed her birthday party because I was negotiating a critical acquisition in Tokyo. She accused me of caring more about my business than about our marriage. The truth was, she was probably right. But I couldn't understand why she expected me to change the very qualities that had attracted her to me in the first place. Maybe she hoped that marriage would inspire you to find more balance in your life," Maya suggested. Laughed bitterly. "Balance is what unsuccessful people use to justify their mediocrity. I didn't build a $3 billion empire by seeking balance. I did it by being obsessed, driven, and willing to sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term achievement. Maya was beginning to understand the complexity of the man sitting across from her. Beneath his arrogance and wealth was someone who had been deeply hurt by the failure of his marriage and was now trying to protect himself from future disappointment. So your solution is to find a wife who's equally obsessed and driven. My solution is to find a partner who understands excellence and isn't threatened by ambition. Someone who has achieved something significant through their own efforts and can appreciate what it takes to succeed at the highest levels. Maya considered his words carefully. There was a certain logic to his approach, even if his methods were unconventional. But even if I accepted your premise that compatibility is more important than love, how can you be sure we're actually compatible? We've spent less than 4 hours together. Because I've been observing you carefully since the moment we met, replied. The way you handled my initial skepticism showed grace under pressure. The way you prepared for the flight showed attention to detail and professionalism. The way you flew today showed creativity, skill, and the ability to perform under stress. And the way you're questioning this proposal right now shows intelligence and independent thinking. Maya felt herself wavering despite her better judgment. There was something seductive about absolute confidence and his apparent appreciation for her abilities. When was the last time someone had recognized and valued her skills so completely? What exactly would this marriage look like? She heard herself asking, though part of her couldn't believe she was entertaining the idea. His eyes lit up at the question. Partnership in every sense of the word. You'd have complete financial security, access to opportunities and experiences most people never dream of. You could continue flying, but as my personal pilot, with access to the most advanced aircraft in the world. We'd travel together, work together, build something extraordinary together. And what would you get out of this arrangement? A partner who understands excellence. Someone who won't resent my success or try to change who I am. Someone who brings her own achievements and ambitions to the relationship rather than just reflecting mine. Maya stood up again and walked to the window, looking out at the Swiss Alps in the distance. The mountains she had just flown through with such precision, and joy seemed almost symbolic now, representing challenges that could be overcome with skill, preparation, and courage. This is insane, she muttered to herself. Most truly significant decisions seem insane to conventional thinking, said from behind her. The question is whether you're brave enough to seize an extraordinary opportunity when it presents itself. Maya turned back to face him. And if I say no, if I decide this whole thing is too crazy to consider, then you'll return to your normal life, flying routine charter flights for people who don't appreciate your abilities. You'll be safe, comfortable, and completely ordinary. There's nothing wrong with that choice, Maya. Most people make it. The challenge in his voice was unmistakable, and Maya felt her competitive spirit rising in response. She had spent her entire career proving that she was anything but ordinary. The idea of settling for a conventional life after tasting what was possible with unlimited resources was genuinely difficult to dismiss. I need time to think about this, she said finally. Of course, but not too much time. I'm flying to New York tomorrow evening, and I'd like to know your decision before then. Maya's mind raced with practical questions. What about my job, my apartment, my life in Monaco? All easily handled. I'd pay any penalties for breaking your employment contract. Your apartment can be kept as an investment or sold, whichever you prefer. As for your life, well, you'd be starting a new one. The casual way he dismissed the practical obstacles was both impressive and slightly terrifying. Maya realized that for someone with resources, there really were very few problems that couldn't be solved with money and influence. I'd want a prenuptial agreement, she said, surprising herself with how quickly the practical considerations were occurring to her. Absolutely, I'd insist on one, but it would be generous in your favor. You'd never have to worry about financial security, regardless of what happens between us. And if the marriage doesn't work out? Consider the question seriously. Then we'd divorce as civilized adults and part ways with mutual respect. You'd have gained experiences and opportunities that would set you up for whatever you wanted to do next. Maya felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the decision facing her. Every rational part of her mind was screaming that this was reckless and impulsive. But another part of her, the part that had fallen in love with flying precisely because it offered the possibility of transcending ordinary limitations, was intrigued by the opportunity was offering. "I need to walk around and clear my head," she announced. "Of course, take all the time you need. I'll arrange for a car to take us to a hotel where you can think things over properly." As they disembarked from the aircraft, Maya found herself acutely aware of the attention they were attracting from airport personnel. Blackwood was apparently well known even here in Geneva, and his arrival was being noted by several people who seemed to recognize him. The black Mercedes that met them at the aircraft was even more luxurious than with a driver who greeted by name and seemed familiar with his preferences. As they drove through the streets of Geneva toward the hotel, Maya caught glimpses of the lifestyle she was being offered. Five-star accommodations, deferential service, and access to experiences that were completely beyond her current means. The hotel was the kind of establishment Maya had only seen in magazines. The lobby was an elegant blend of traditional European luxury and modern sophistication, with guests who carried themselves with the casual confidence that came from wealth and privilege. Had arranged for adjoining suites on the top floor, with Maya's room featuring a spectacular view of Lake Geneva and the Alps beyond. As she stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the same mountains she had flown through just hours earlier, she tried to process the extraordinary turn her life had taken. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. When she opened it, she found a hotel staff member with a garment bag. "Compliments of Mr. Blackwood," the young woman said with a polite smile. "He thought you might want to change for dinner." Maya accepted the bag with curiosity, and after the staff member left, unzipped it to reveal an elegant black dress that appeared to be exactly her size. The fabric was luxurious, the cut sophisticated, and the designer label one that Maya recognized but had never been able to afford. She held the dress up to herself in the mirror and had to admit that had excellent taste. The style would complement her figure perfectly while remaining appropriate for fine dining. The fact that he had somehow arranged for it to be delivered in her exact size within an hour of their arrival was both impressive and slightly unnerving. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from "Dinner at 8 if you'd like to continue our conversation. No pressure if you'd prefer to think alone." She looked at the dress again, then at her reflection in the mirror. The practical pilot in uniform looked back at her, but she could imagine how she would look in the elegant dress. She could imagine sitting across from in some impossibly sophisticated restaurant, discussing the future they might build together. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, she found herself reaching for the zipper of her pilot's uniform. An hour later, Maya stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing herself. The dress fit perfectly, as she had suspected it would, transforming her from a competent professional into someone who looked like she belonged in this world. Her reflection seemed to belong in the pages of a fashion magazine rather than in the cockpit of an aircraft. As she applied the finishing touches to her makeup, Maya found herself thinking about the conversation that awaited her downstairs. She still had no idea what her answer would be, but she knew that whatever decision she made would fundamentally change the course of her life. When the elevator doors opened to reveal the hotel's elegant restaurant, Maya saw waiting for her at a corner table with a view of the lake. He had changed into a perfectly tailored dark suit that emphasized his tall frame and confident bearing. As she approached the table, she noticed that several other diners had recognized him and were stealing glances in their direction. "You look stunning," said as he stood to pull out her chair. "The dress suits you perfectly." "It's beautiful, thank you, though I'm still processing how you managed to have it delivered in my exact size." Smiled as he returned to his seat. "I have an excellent memory for details, and I've learned to work with vendors who can execute quickly when necessary." As they settled into dinner, Maya found herself genuinely enjoying his company for the first time since they'd met. Away from the aircraft and the pressure of his bizarre proposal, he revealed himself to be intelligent, well-traveled, and surprisingly thoughtful. He asked about her background, her family, and her dreams for the future, seeming genuinely interested in her responses. "Tell me about growing up as a pilot's daughter," he said as they shared an appetizer. "That must have influenced your career choice significantly." Maya smiled, thinking of her father. "Dad never pushed me toward aviation, actually. He wanted me to have more options than he'd had. But I loved everything about flying from the time I was old enough to understand what he did for a living. The freedom, the precision, the way aircraft could take you anywhere in the world." "And your mother, was she supportive of your career choice?" She worried about the dangers and the challenges I'd face as a woman in a male-dominated industry. But she also recognized how passionate I was about it. She used to say that trying to keep me away from aviation would be like trying to keep a bird from flying. Nodded thoughtfully. That kind of passion is rare. Most people never find something they care about that deeply. As the evening progressed, Maya found herself relaxing despite the magnitude of the decision looming over her. Was an engaging conversationalist, and she was beginning to see glimpses of the man behind the billionaire facade. His stories of building his business empire revealed someone who was driven not just by money, but by the challenge of creating something significant. "What drives you?" Maya asked during a lull in the conversation. "I mean, you already have more money than you could spend in several lifetimes. What keeps you motivated?" Consider the question carefully. "Legacy, I suppose. The desire to build something that will outlast me. Money is just a way of keeping score. What really matters is creating innovations that change how people live and work." "And where does marriage fit into that vision?" "A successful partnership amplifies individual achievements. Two people working together toward shared goals can accomplish things that neither could achieve alone. That's what I'm looking for, Maya. Not just a wife, but a true partner in building something extraordinary." As dessert arrived, Maya realized that the evening had shifted her perspective on his proposal in ways she hadn't expected. She was beginning to see the man behind the arrogance, and what she saw was complex and compelling in ways that challenged her initial impressions. She said finally, "I need to ask you something directly. Are you capable of love, or are you so focused on practical considerations that you've closed yourself off from emotional connection?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was quiet for several moments, staring out at the lights reflecting off Lake Geneva. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I thought I was in love with Victoria, but looking back, I'm not sure if what I felt was love or just the excitement of finding someone who seemed to fit into my life perfectly. When the marriage ended, I convinced myself that love was an illusion, a chemical reaction that interfered with clear thinking." "But you're not certain about that?" Looked directly at her, and for the first time since they'd met, his confidence seemed to waver slightly. "No, I'm not certain. What I am certain of is that I've never met anyone who impressed me as much as you did today, and I've never felt as comfortable talking with someone as I have with you tonight." Maya felt something shift inside her chest at his words. Despite all her reservations, despite the insanity of the situation, she was genuinely attracted to this complicated, driven, wounded man sitting across from her. "If I agreed to this," she said slowly, "what would our relationship look like day to day? Would we be business partners who happen to share a bed, or would there be room for something deeper to develop between us?" "I'd hope for something deeper," replied honestly. "I may not understand love the way most people talk about it, but I know I want more than just a business arrangement. I want companionship, intimacy, shared experiences. I want someone to build a life with, not just a company." Maya sat back in her chair, her mind racing with possibilities and concerns. The rational part of her brain was still insisting that this was madness, but her heart was beginning to whisper that maybe, just maybe, this could be the adventure she had always dreamed of. "I need to sleep on this," she said finally. "This is the biggest decision I've ever had to make, and I want to be sure I'm thinking clearly." Nodded, though she could see the anxiety in his eyes. "Of course, take all the time you need. My offer stands regardless of how long you need to decide." As they walked back to the elevator, Maya felt take her hand gently in his. The gesture was simple, almost innocent, but it sent a shock of electricity through her that surprised her with its intensity. Standing outside her hotel room door, Maya turned to face one final time before making her decision. "Thank you for tonight. For the first time since we met, I feel like I've seen the real you." "And what do you think of the real me?" Maya reached up and touched his face gently. "I think you're much more complicated and vulnerable than you want people to see, and I think that underneath all that armor you've built around your heart, there might be someone worth taking a risk for." Before she could lose her nerve, Maya stood on her tiptoes and kissed him softly. It was meant to be a brief, experimental kiss, but when responded by pulling her closer, it became something deeper and more promising. When they finally separated, both of them were breathing heavily. "Good night," Maya whispered, slipping into her room before her resolve could weaken any further. As she closed the door behind her, Maya leaned against it and closed her eyes. Her heart was pounding. Maya woke before dawn, her internal clock still adjusted to Monaco time. She lay in the luxurious hotel bed, watching the sun slowly illuminate the Swiss Alps through her floor-to-ceiling windows, and tried to make sense of the decision that awaited her. The events of the previous day felt almost dreamlike in their intensity and impossibility. She thought about the kiss they had shared outside her hotel room door, the way her body had responded to his touch, the unexpected vulnerability she had glimpsed behind his carefully constructed facade. But she also thought about the practical implications of what he was proposing, the enormous leap of faith required to marry someone she had known for less than 24 hours. Maya ordered room service and spent the morning on the hotel room's private balcony, sipping coffee and watching the lake below. She called her best friend Sarah in Monaco, carefully avoiding the details of his proposal while seeking advice about major life changes in general. "Maya, you sound different," Sarah observed during their conversation. "Something big is happening, isn't it?" "Maybe. I'm trying to decide whether to take a huge risk or play it safe." "When have you ever played it safe?" Sarah laughed. "You're the woman who convinced our flight school to let her practice aerobatic maneuvers You're the woman who took a job flying charter flights for eccentric billionaires instead of going straight to the airlines like everyone expected." Maya smiled despite her anxiety. Sarah was right about her tendency to choose challenging paths over conventional ones. "This is different, though. This decision could affect the rest of my life." "Honey, every important decision affects the rest of your life. The question is whether you're more afraid of making the wrong choice or missing out on something extraordinary." After ending the call, Maya realized that Sarah had inadvertently provided the framework she needed for her decision. She had always been someone who chose challenging opportunities over safe ones, who believed that growth required risk. The question wasn't whether his proposal was sensible by conventional standards, but whether it represented the kind of opportunity that could transform her life in ways she had never imagined. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. When she opened it, she found holding 2 travel cups of coffee and wearing a more casual outfit than she had seen him in before. Dark jeans, a white button-down shirt, and a leather jacket that made him look more approachable than his usual business attire. "Good morning," he said with a tentative smile. "I thought you might like some proper coffee while you think, and I wondered if you'd be interested in taking a walk around the lake. Sometimes movement helps with difficult decisions." Maya accepted the coffee gratefully and retrieved a jacket from her room. As they walked through the hotel lobby and out into the crisp Geneva morning, she appreciated his apparent understanding that she needed space to process without pressure. The walking path around Lake Geneva was peaceful in the early morning hours, with joggers and dog walkers providing a gentle backdrop to their conversation. Seemed content to walk in comfortable silence, occasionally pointing out interesting architecture or sharing brief stories about his previous visits to Geneva. "I have a confession to make," Maya said as they paused at a scenic overlook with a view of the jet fountain in the distance. "Last night was the first time in my adult life that I've seriously considered making a major decision based on emotion rather than careful analysis." Turned to face her fully, "And how does that feel?" "Terrifying, exhilarating, completely unlike me." Maya laughed nervously. "I'm the person who researches everything to death. I spent 3 months comparing aviation insurance policies before choosing one. The idea of agreeing to marry someone after knowing them for one day goes against every instinct I have." "But you're considering it anyway." "I'm considering it because of what happened yesterday, both in the air and over dinner. When I was flying through those mountains, I felt more alive and fulfilled than I have in years. And when we were talking last night, I saw glimpses of someone I think I could genuinely care about." Was quiet for several moments, watching a small sailboat navigate the lake below them. "Maya, I need to tell you something. Yesterday wasn't entirely spontaneous on my part." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "What do you mean?" "I requested you specifically when I booked the charter. I had heard about a young black woman pilot who was supposed to be exceptionally skilled, and I was curious to see if the reports were accurate." Maya stared at him, processing this revelation. So this was all planned? The challenge, the proposal, everything? "No," said quickly. "I had planned to test your flying abilities, yes. I'm always interested in meeting people who excel in their fields, but the marriage proposal was completely spontaneous." It occurred to me during the flight that you represented everything I thought I was looking for in a partner. Maya began walking again, needing the movement to help her think through this new information. So you researched me beforehand. What else do you know about my background? I know that you graduated at the top of your class from flight school. I know that you've never had an accident or serious incident. I know that other pilots speak about your skills with genuine respect, which is rare in your industry. And I know that you've been frustrated by the limited opportunities available to you in commercial aviation. The last point hit closer to home than Maya was comfortable with. How could you possibly know that? Because exceptional people are always frustrated by conventional limitations. It's what drives them to achieve more than their circumstances suggest is possible. They walked in silence for several minutes while Maya processed this information. On one hand, she felt manipulated by the revelation that had sought her out deliberately. On the other hand, she was impressed that he had done enough research to identify her as someone worth meeting. "Are you angry?" asked eventually. Maya considered the question carefully. "I should be, but honestly, I'm more impressed than angry. The fact that you went to the trouble of finding me suggests that you're serious about this, not just making an impulsive gesture." "I am serious, Maya. More serious than I've been about anything personal in years." They had completed almost a full circuit of the lake when Maya realized she had made her decision. It wasn't a rational choice based on careful analysis of pros and cons. It was an intuitive leap based on her assessment of as a person and her own desire to embrace an extraordinary opportunity. She said, stopping beside a bench overlooking the water, "I want to say yes, but I have conditions." His face lit up with excitement, but he tried to maintain his composure. "Of course, what are your conditions?" "First, I want a 6-month trial period before we make anything legally binding. A real marriage, living together, sharing our lives, but with the understanding that either of us can walk away if it's not working." "Agreed completely. What else?" "Second, I want to continue flying, but not just as your personal pilot. I want opportunities to develop my skills further, maybe get into competition aerobatics or test piloting. I don't want marriage to limit my career growth." "I wouldn't want it to. In fact, I think I can provide opportunities you wouldn't have access to otherwise. I know people in aerospace development who are always looking for skilled test pilots." Maya felt a surge of excitement at the possibilities he was describing. "Third, I want us to attend couples counseling. If we're going to build a real partnership, we need professional help navigating the challenges of such an unusual beginning." Looked slightly uncomfortable with this condition. "I've never been to therapy." "Neither have I, but what we're attempting is unprecedented. We need all the help we can get to make it work." After a moment's hesitation, nodded. "Agreed, what else?" "Finally, I want your promise that you'll be honest with me about your feelings as they develop. If you find yourself falling in love with me, I want to know. If you decide this was a mistake, I want to know that too. No games, no manipulation, just complete honesty about where we stand." Extended his hand formally. "You have my word on all of those conditions. Do we have an agreement?" Maya looked at his outstretched hand, knowing that shaking it would commit her to the most audacious decision of her life. She thought about her grandfather, the Tuskegee airman who had broken barriers and seized opportunities despite the risks. She thought about all the times she had chosen the challenging path over the safe one. She thought about the way she had felt flying through the Alps yesterday, fully alive and completely herself. She reached out and shook his hand firmly. "We have an agreement." Pulled her into his arms and spun her around, his joy and relief evident in his laughter. When he set her down, they were both grinning like children who had just agreed to run away and join the circus. "So what happens now?" Maya asked, suddenly feeling the magnitude of what they had committed to. "Now we go back to the hotel, make some phone calls, and start planning our new life together. I want to introduce you to my world properly, and I want to learn everything about yours." As they walked back toward the hotel, Maya felt a mixture of excitement and terror that she suspected would characterize her emotions for the foreseeable future. She was about to embark on an adventure that would test every aspect of her character and abilities. The first test came sooner than expected. As they entered the hotel lobby, Maya noticed several people with cameras gathered near the entrance. Tensed beside her, and she realized that somehow the media had learned about their presence in Geneva. "Mr. Blackwood," one of the photographers called out. Can you confirm reports that you're planning another acquisition in Switzerland? Placed a protective hand on Maya's back, guiding her toward the elevators. No comment, he said firmly, but Maya could see the flash of camera bulbs reflecting off the marble walls around them. In the elevator, Maya realized that this was just a small taste of what her life would be like as wife. The scrutiny, the constant attention, the loss of privacy that came with being associated with someone of his prominence. Does this happen often? She asked. More often than I'd like. We'll need to be careful about how we handle the public announcement of our relationship. The media attention can be overwhelming if it's not managed properly. Maya nodded, trying to imagine how her family and friends would react when they learned about her engagement from news reports, rather than from her directly. I need to call my parents before this becomes public. Of course, and Maya, I want you to know that I'll do everything I can to protect your privacy and make this transition as smooth as possible. Back in their adjoining suites, Maya placed the most difficult phone call of her life. Her parents listened in stunned silence as she explained the basic facts of her situation, carefully leaving out the more outrageous details of how she had met. Sweetheart, her father said finally, his voice carrying a mixture of concern and confusion, this is very sudden. Are you sure you've thought this through carefully? I know it sounds crazy, Dad, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Is an extraordinary man, and this is an extraordinary opportunity. Her mother was more direct in her concerns. Maya, honey, we raised you to be independent and self-sufficient. I'm worried that you're being swept away by wealth and status rather than making a decision based on genuine feelings. Mom, I understand your concerns, but this isn't about money. It's about finding someone who appreciates my abilities and wants to build something significant together. Sees my potential in ways that no one else ever has. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with her parents expressing their worries while trying to be supportive of her decision. Maya promised to bring to meet them soon and to keep them informed about how the relationship developed. After ending the call, Maya felt emotionally drained, but also relieved to have taken the first step toward integrating their two worlds. She found in his suite, speaking rapidly in what sounded like German to someone on his phone. When he saw her, he wrapped up the call quickly. How did your parents take the news? He asked. About as well as could be expected. They're concerned but trying to be supportive. What about you? Do you have family you need to inform? His expression darkened slightly. My parents died in a car accident when I was in college. I have a sister, but we're not close. She'll probably learn about this from the media like everyone else. Maya felt a pang of sympathy for. She was beginning to understand that his unconventional approach to relationships might stem partly from a lack of close family connections and the isolation that came with his wealth and success. I'd like to meet your sister, Maya said gently. If we're going to be married, I want to understand your family dynamics. Perhaps eventually. Right now, I'm more interested in planning our immediate future. I've arranged for us to fly to New York this evening. I want to show you my home there and introduce you to some key people in my organization. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Maya packed her belongings while made arrangements for their departure. A shopping consultant arrived at the hotel with several outfits in Maya's size, ensuring she would have appropriate clothing for social events in New York. The efficiency with which managed these details was both impressive and slightly overwhelming. As they prepared to leave for the airport, Maya caught sight of herself in the mirror wearing one of the new outfits had selected for her. The reflection showed a woman who looked sophisticated, confident, and completely comfortable in expensive clothing. But underneath the surface, Maya wondered if she was changing too quickly, adapting to this world in ways that might compromise her own identity. The flight to New York provided an opportunity for them to talk more about their expectations and concerns. Maya was relieved to discover that owned his own aircraft for long-distance travel, a state-of-the-art Bombardier Global 7500 that made that they had flown the day before seem modest by comparison. This is incredible, Maya said as she explored the aircraft's cabin, which featured a bedroom, office space, and living area that rivaled luxury hotel accommodations. How often do you use this? Several times a month for business travel. But I'm hoping it will see more personal use now that I have someone to share these experiences with. As they settled into the comfortable seating for the 8-hour flight, pulled out a tablet and began showing Maya photographs of his various properties around the world. The penthouse apartment in Manhattan, the estate in the Hamptons, the villa in Tuscany, the ski chalet in Aspen. Each property was more stunning than the last, representing a lifestyle that Maya had only seen in movies. "Which one feels most like home to you?" Maya asked. Considered the question carefully. "Honestly, none of them feel like home in the way most people mean it. They're beautiful and comfortable, but they're more like high-end hotels than homes. I'm hoping that having someone to share them with will change that." The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep in Maya's heart. She was beginning to understand that for all his wealth and success, was fundamentally lonely. His proposal wasn't just about finding a skilled partner. It was about finding someone who could help him create the sense of home and connection that his money couldn't buy. As the aircraft crossed the Atlantic, Maya found herself increasingly excited about the adventure they were embarking on together. Yes, it was risky and unconventional. Yes, there were 1,000 ways it could go wrong. But there was also the possibility that it could go spectacularly right, that they could create something together that neither of them could achieve alone. When they landed at airport in New Jersey, Maya got her first real taste of what it meant to be associated with Blackwood. A motorcade of black SUVs waited on the tarmac, along with several serious-looking men who were obviously security personnel. As they transferred from the aircraft to the vehicles, Maya noticed other passengers and airport staff watching their every move. "Is all this really necessary?" Maya asked as they settled into the back seat of the lead vehicle. "I learned the hard way that high-profile individuals need proper security," replied. "There are people who see wealthy businessmen as symbols of inequality or oppression. Better to be than sorry." As they drove through the Queens Midtown Tunnel toward Manhattan, Maya stared out the window at the city lights reflecting off the East River. In less than 48 hours, her entire life had been transformed. She was no longer Captain Maya Richardson, charter pilot from Monaco. She was now Maya Richardson, of Billionaire Blackwood, about to enter a world of privilege and opportunity that she could barely comprehend. The magnitude of the change was both thrilling and terrifying. But as she felt take her hand in the D6 months later, Maya stood on the terrace of Manhattan penthouse, watching the sun set over Central Park. The view from the 52nd floor never failed to take her breath away, but tonight it held special significance. Tonight marked exactly 6 months since she had agreed to this extraordinary proposal in Geneva, and tonight they would make their final decision about whether to proceed with their marriage. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of experiences that had challenged every assumption Maya had ever held about herself and her capabilities, had been true to his word about providing opportunities for her career development. She was now a certified test pilot for his aerospace division, having spent 3 months training with former military pilots and aerospace engineers. She had also competed in her first aerobatic competition, placing third in the advanced category and earning recognition from pilots who had been skeptical of her abilities. But the professional achievements, as satisfying as they were, paled in comparison to the personal journey she had undertaken. Living with had revealed layers of complexity in his character that she was still discovering. He was driven and demanding, yes, but also surprisingly gentle and thoughtful in their private moments. He could be ruthless in business negotiations, while simultaneously showing extraordinary kindness to his household staff and genuine concern for the employees of his various companies. Maya had also discovered that some emotional walls, built over years of professional success and personal disappointment, were slowly coming down. The man who had initially claimed that love was overrated was now someone who brought her coffee every morning, who remembered every detail of her conversations with her parents, and who had spent countless hours learning to understand her moods and preferences. The couple's counseling sessions that Maya had insisted upon had been challenging but transformative for both of them. Dr. Elizabeth, their therapist, had helped them navigate the unique circumstances of their relationship while building genuine communication skills and emotional intimacy. "The foundation you're building together is actually quite strong," Doctor had told them during their most recent session. "You've approached this relationship with honesty, intentionality, and mutual respect. Many couples who marry after years of courtship have weaker foundations than what you've created in 6 months." Maya heard the penthouse door open behind her and turned to see emerging onto the terrace carrying 2 glasses of champagne. He had changed from his business suit into dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, and his smile carried the mixture of confidence and nervousness that had become familiar to her over the past months. "Are you ready for the conversation that will determine the rest of our lives?" he asked, handing her a glass. Maya accepted the champagne but didn't drink immediately. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," admitted with a laugh, "which is not an emotion I'm accustomed to feeling about anything. But then again, I've never had so much writing on a single conversation before." They settled onto the comfortable outdoor furniture, and Maya found herself studying space in the golden light of the setting sun. Over the past 6 months, she had watched the lines of stress around his eyes soften, had seen him smile more frequently and genuinely than he had when they first met. She had also seen him struggle with vulnerability, with learning to trust another person with his emotions and fears. Maya began, "Before we make this decision, I need to tell you something important. Something I've been afraid to say because I wasn't sure how you would react." Set down his glass and turned to face her fully. "You can tell me anything, Maya. After everything we've shared over these past months, there's nothing you could say that would shock me." Maya took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would change their relationship forever, regardless of what they decided about marriage. "I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air between them for several heartbeats. His expression went through a series of subtle changes as he processed what she had said. Maya saw surprise, relief, joy, and something that might have been fear cross his features before he finally spoke. "Maya, he began, then stopped and started over. "6 months ago, I would have told you that love was an illusion, a chemical reaction that interfered with rational decision-making. I would have dismissed your feelings as temporary infatuation or Stockholm syndrome or any number of psychological phenomena that had logical explanations." Maya felt her heart begin to race, unsure whether his response was leading toward acceptance or rejection of her of the back seat. Maya knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them. She had always been someone who chose the extraordinary path over the safe one, and this was simply the most extraordinary choice she had ever made. Her mind was spinning, and she knew that whatever decision she made in the morning would change her life forever. "Now, Captain Richardson, we discuss the terms of our engagement,"